In the afternoon, participants broke out into 3 technical clusters where various papers were presented. Participants in Cluster 1, which was about production, productivity and market access, had 2 papers. The first paper that was presented by Dr. Shelemaya Kea focused on on-farm production and productivity in the East African community 50 years after independence. It was discussed by Dr. Mutunga.
So, food production in East Africa, one can go back to independence 1961. That time, if you look at the literature and the record, we had plenty of food. Africa was not starving. There was no problem of food production. Later on, of course, we know about the Green Revolution in 1970. And of course, India, Asia, North and West Africa, Latin America benefited. Africa missed for the reasons you know very well. And of course, as we travel along the years, and then by 1996, it was getting very grave. There were about 840 million people, which FAO quoted. And the World Food Summit, the first World Food Summit was called in Rome. But there were nearly almost 100 presidents to discuss how that number can be halved by 2015. Before long, by about 2002, the number was not going down. Another World Food Summit was called in Rome to discuss how to move forward. And immediately also the MDGs were put in place. And we are still somehow having that problem. How do we have enough food for our people?
I want to go to the recommendations that have been made. Greater emphasis on staples. Which staples? Which ones should we emphasize on, and how do we protect them also? The food quality, the quality parameters. Which quality parameters are affected? Which one is the most affected quality parameter? Which one should we worry about? Is it the carbohydrates? Is it the vitamins? And in terms of quality, should we worry about quality or actually quantity in terms of being able to feed our people? What should be number one? Then the value addition. I would wonder, when shall we feel like we are cheated as people of this region, as farmers of this region? When shall we advise our farmers that selling wool or raw product is a loss? When shall we get a point where we feel the pain of production? Because sometimes we sell below producer price. And these are very small, poor people. When shall we feel the pain and protect the poor people from getting more and more, losing a lot more? I would like to very briefly mention about considering the future. How do we move into the future in a systematic and organized manner? Looking at the foresight, what is the composition, what is the content of our foresight research? What are we looking at 50 years from today, 20 years from today? What is in that particular kind of docket? What's there? Do we actually take time to think about it? Or we are just moving on? Mechanization. In every day literature you find, mechanization is not possible, it's not easy for smallholders. Who said that? Is there any tractor which is bigger than half an acre of land? Even 10 by 10 tractors will be smaller. So they can work on some of those land only that we are not looking at the most important thing. And the most important thing in this case is organizing our farmers. I will not talk about that a lot because I come from that background, but let me tell you something. The day Africa decides to organize its agriculture, Africa will grow. That's the beginning of growth. We can do all other things the way we want to do them. But the reality is, we need to organize the small because they are small and many. We cannot take them to the ocean and put them there. And therefore have land and enlarge it. We have to organize them, and then we can mechanize our agriculture, and then we can move into transformation, and we will increase the income to the farmers, and we shall move in the right direction.
The second paper that was presented by Geoffrey Murema and Jean Ndigumana was about value addition for incomes and employment through post-harvest management and agro-processing across all subsectors. It was discussed by Dr. Betty Bugusu.
Basically, there are 3 types of value chains in agriculture in developing countries. What are called the A systems, which cater for the low-income sector. This is the markets or the lady with the own or a small trader with a pickup sending the food to the local market or even the town market. Then the B system, which caters for the local, medium, middle, and high-income sector, largely the supermarket and the more up-market markets. And the C system, which caters for the export market, which has global standards. Now, East African countries have actually a long experience with the C systems. in export crops. As I've said here, tea, horticulture, we've set up very good value chains and institutional infrastructure to export. But most attention seems to be devoted to the C system, but large value, but actually if you look at the whole thing, the large value and volumes are likely to be in the A and B systems. We therefore need to learn from the experience with C systems as implemented in the crop sector, cash crop sector in the region.
First and foremost, I'd like to say that the authors really reminded us the importance of learning from the past. And so it's, we made mistakes, we had successes, and at this point we need to look at what were the successes and how do we move forward. I also understand, commend them for prescribing the fact that just one size doesn't fit all. Every country within the region has its unique conditions, and so we have to have technologies, or we have to have solutions that actually are relevant to the situation in the individual countries. Finally, the fact that it's going to be very important for the governments or the public sector to create enabling environment for post-harvest to prosper in this region. So those were really strong points that came out of this paper that I thought I would just spend a few of the first 10 minutes that I have to emphasize.
Cluster 2, that discussed knowledge systems and business development, also had 2 papers. Paper 1 was on agricultural development systems in the East African Community region, lessons from the past 50 years and prospects for the future. Paper 1 was presented by Agnes Mwangombe and Elisa Biti. It was discussed by Dr. Selim Nadi.
The young governments of East Africa put in place several initiatives to bring about agricultural growth after independence. That is positive. Agricultural education and training expanded at all levels. That's very good. Several extension systems are being used to deliver research products, but there is still mixed feeling whether they have succeeded or not. What do we pick from here? Agriculture must be prioritized as a business by all the states. Agricultural research institutions need to be more funded adequately by government. Need to fully integrate ICT. Both university colleges and colleges curricula should be revised or overhauled to meet the demand of the new farmers, of the youth. Provide platform for farmers. Farmers must be key in our research from now on, even in our policies should be important. A national agricultural education policy is needed in each state. In Uganda, we don't have it. It's simply a draft.
The mixing of input with extension actually kills the extension. Even from my experience, I also know that, and from continental experience is the same thing. And basically, input system should be in the private sector hands, even if it is government funded. And then the issue of retooling for extension, the integration of knowledge into the actors of cultural education, capacity development, and then issues of providing platforms where actors, the major actors can play a role. That's talking about innovation systems.
The second paper on agricultural business and enterprises development services over the last 50 years and vision for the future was presented by Tony Nsanganira and Said Bansi. It was discussed by Anastasia Kio.
In terms of the agriculture context in Africa, we know that agricultural production and productivity plays a key role in lifting smallholder producers out of poverty in the region. And as a result, agricultural productivity, it grew tremendously after independence in sub-Saharan Africa over the years, right after independence. But what happened? Somewhere along the line, that changed. In any case, there are opportunities to sustain the growth within the agriculture sector because of a couple of reasons: price incentives for producers as a result of unified exchange rate, then high international commodity prices are creating demand within our local economies within the region here, which serves as an opportunity for us to be able to produce and meet the market demand here. And also strong commitment shown by our African leaders and regional institutions and development partners as well. We heard about much of this morning. In terms of the characteristics, we have most of the farmers who are engaged in contract farming. And with contract farming, from our review of literature, we realized there are about two different kinds. One is contract farming with embedded service, which will include extension service provision, input service provision, or without embedded service, which is just providing or having an agreement signed between a producer or a producer group and a buyer or a processor, which within the contract they agree on the quantity, the volume, and the prices that they are going to exchange between the commodity and the farmer and the producer.
Initially at independence, most of the countries in the region actually got their extension services through the government. It was provided by the public, but as time has moved on, and I'm sure you can agree with me, you can identify with me, we've kind of tried to privatize these services, and so many models have come up with, and we've seen from the presentation how much we've been able to get quite a number of issues and how the different models are being used for different services. In the sub-Saharan Africa since 1980s, that is around the time the subs were introduced into the region, quite a number of issues have happened into our economies, especially to the small-scale farmers who were kind of caught unaware by the new developments which came up with subs. And as the presenter, or rather as it is done in the paper, that we do agree that whatever has been discussed here is not exhaustive. We still have so many other models outside there, but we can say what we have here is quite representative of what we have on the ground.
The third cluster that discussed human capital, natural resources and policies, also had two papers. Paper 1 on drivers of agricultural transformation was presented and discussed by Francis Ntuku.
We have done commendably, and we have plans to do better. But why is the agricultural sector still crawling? We must revisit these issues, which we say we have done well, but still single out where we need to improve. And I want to remind you the professor's question, how? Private-public partnership, agricultural subsidies, and I added one for myself, civic action. People's participation and being involved in lobbying issues, advocacy issues, that which can cause action.
The second paper on policies, institutional framework and international development interventions was presented by Jean Mbinigaba and Alfred Bizoza. It was discussed by Dr. Ajayi Oluyede.
The linkage between research output and the policy reform process is not easy to appreciate, especially in the agriculture sector. It's difficult to measure the differential contribution of the institution and policies in agriculture growth due to inadequate data, but benefits of these can be captured through their facilitation effects, especially promoting the private sector investment, creating an enabling environment for private sector, civil society, and even community participation in the sector development.
The issue with policies in East African community, and indeed in the whole of Africa, is not the shortage of policies. There are good policies, there are good intentions, there are good strategies, but the key problem, challenge is implementation gap. So we need to really start from that point and know what are the issues. That's a key issue. Policies are there, but they're not being implemented. There's a big gap between the jure in principle and the reality of policies. If you go to many Ministry of Agriculture, you find very many documents which are very nice, land policies, agri policies, but are they implemented? Second issue related to that is the fact of that there are sometimes policy reversals. And it has implication, we are talking of getting private sectors involved. But you see, private sectors will not get involved in things, they want to make calculated risk. So many times there are policies, but at some other point, before they are fully implemented, they are reversed and a new one comes up. So that's an issue. And until some of these things are sorted out, it will not give very good confidence to private sector to get involved into it. We cannot push them for them to come. We have to make sure that the policies they respond to economic stimuli.
Cluster discussions continued into day 3. Cluster 1 had 2 papers. Paper 1 on agriculture marketing and trade for wealth creation was presented by Isaac Minde and Jean Ndimubandi.
Wealth in marketing and trade accrues in the form of the incomes that are received from participation at various segments in the chain from production to consumption. So people have to get jobs to move things around, to move goods and services along the chain. Farmers, for example, may participate by first of all producing and marketing, and as one gets involved in that chain, he or she is investing her labor, her expertise, her intellect, and in the process, she's getting rewarded for what she has done, and she'll get it in the form of income, and that is part of wealth.
The second paper on agricultural productivity in the East African community, Trends, Drivers and Determinants, was presented by Joseph Karugia and Paul Guthiga.
Productivity is generally low. We are not doing well compared to the rest of the world. Our yields are highly variable, and actually they depend on the weather patterns. And the increased production that we observe is actually driven by either increasing area or number of animals rather than increasing productivity per unit of land or per animal. But in the long term, we cannot sustain our agriculture through increasing production. We can only do that sustainably in the future by increasing productivity. So we must think about how do we use the available resources more efficiently, especially land, especially when that begins to become a binding constraint as our population increases.
Just some few additional points on, for example, the role of soil characteristics, soil mapping, and fertilizers, and so on. I think that is important, but I think from the perspective that we are coming from, we'll probably want to also worry about the availability of fertilizers at the right prices, also distribution systems that work. But in my view, there is the issue of how do the farmers use this information? And because we can do the soil mapping, we can even tell the fertility levels, but are farmers able, for example, to go to their fields with some simple tools that enable them to tell, this is the amount of nitrogen that I have in the soil, this is the additional that I need. Some simple tools, some testing technologies that they can actually use. Having that information in the lab is great, but it won't help the farmers in the field. And perhaps there is need for research in areas such as those.
Cluster 2 also had 2 papers. Paper 1 on equipping farmers on the future of the East African community was presented by Masi Karanja and Ephraim Nkonya. It was discussed by Sengendo Brian from Britannia Industries.
Policymakers and development partners should change their attitudes from the old subsistence peasant farmer to the current one. The policymakers and the investment and everything is currently only geared towards production, and it does not look at the farmer as a farmer who is connected to the market. This should change now, even though the policies that the government have are very much talking about marketing, but the investment we have seen is not very much reflecting that. Long arm of the government should focus on regulation, security, and provision of public rural services. A private farmer cannot build a road. It's only the government which can do that. A private farmer cannot employ agricultural extension agent who is advising people all around. It's only the government which can do that. So there are many things, and there's no shortage of the role the government can play in helping the farmers do what they are required to do. But the government should keep its clumsy hands out of production and marketing.
For us, our idea of export-free zones has always been of the manufacturers bringing something in and manufacture and take it out. But I was impressed that even those who are producing tea, they can benefit, and the government put a lot of support and benefit into those areas. Then they can benefit into that one. Then I was thinking, can we also have export-free zones for the potato farmers who are selling them even to Nando's, and they can also sell them outside? Will that make that business move and help the smallholder farmers? Turning that Kenya Tea Development Authority into agency has made them to make that huge leap, because now the agency is owned by the people themselves, by the smallholder farmer. They buy shares into it, and everybody want to see what is going on. It becomes much more transparent. When they make loss, everybody realize and correct that. When they make profit, that is also coming very clear. The whole issue now is for them to organize for the new coming challenges in terms of the young Kenyan guy was telling us the land is getting less. But to me, is the idea of recognizing it, the value chain, and having the Kenya, what do you call them, Tea Development Agency as a brokerage who sees what is happening along the whole chain of the tea. So that is the story of the tea.
Cluster 3 also had 2 papers. The first paper on utilization of natural resource endowment in the East African community for the development of agriculture. How adding oil and gas will affect the agriculture sector.
Is where will oil resources enter along the value chain? Will they enter the production stage, at the processing stage, or at what stage will that enter? Now that is academic, but again that is open for research. But by them asking about the various resources that are available now is not to assume that we don't know. I think what they are asking is that we know we have this, but we also know that the level of use is suboptimal. What therefore should be done to ensure that we do not forget them at that level where they are and focus elsewhere, where the last one, on the last one. And then they're also asking about, and then the sectoral link, actually, sectoral link. Probably, agriculture will gain more from the sectoral linkages rather than direct linkages into agriculture. Agriculture cannot wait for direct gain from oil and gas. That's actually the bottom line. I think that's what they were raising here. And then they also asked what risks and opportunities are obtaining in the oil and gas industry, and how can this be dealt with, and what the implications for agriculture. Those are also facts, actually. And then how have other countries dealt with this? And then conclusions drawn. So basically, the authors have covered. For me, what the colored part is what is critical.
The second paper on agriculture and politics, the quality of governance and social-political conflicts, was presented by Godba Tumushabe and Immaculate Maina. It was discussed by Dr. Patrick Maluki.
When you look at the NEPAD, the Paris Declaration, and the G8 Declaration, all of them agree on what that actually African agriculture needs to be fixed. So there is that convergence. Secondly, there is a convergence that governance is important. So again, you see it in the declarations. In case of Africa, you see it in the Africa Peer Review Mechanism. If you look at the questionnaire, very comprehensive questionnaire, it has a section on agriculture. But you also see it in the Declaration on Democracy, Political, Economic, and Corporate Governance. The question is, who holds African political leaders accountable when they sign on commitments they don't intend to honor? Then there is the issue of presidential leadership. There is more of sovereignty and less of action. All these presidents go to these meetings and they flex muscles in terms of like, we are sovereign nations. But one of the things that we try to do is to say, why haven't we been implementing these things? And interestingly, when you look at these African presidents, you realize some of them have been around as long as the Lagos Action Plan has been around. Some of them have been around as long as the Maputo Declaration has been around. And then
Kilimo Trust will organize another conference and bring them together to make new commitments. And then the question is, what is it that we are trying to do that is new? Doing the same old things and hoping that we can achieve a difference. If you consider what is called the coalition of the willing, the infrastructure group, I think we need something for agriculture around that. But when you look at the declarations, the leaders, the three leaders who have been meeting, Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda, they have not talked about irrigation infrastructure. Can we transform agriculture in this sub-region without irrigation? I doubt. So I think those are the key issues that we need to be dealing with, and be honest with ourselves, by the way, because some of these things are painful. To be able to own up and say these things, we must do them differently.
And until governments and systems begin to develop the skills and the capacities of those grassroots efforts, it will be very difficult to attain the regional mandates that we are looking at. And this is because if you look at the kind of documents, most of the whole thing is driven by annexes from the national commitments. So if the national commitments are not done properly, then there's no way the whole system will move forward. We recognize that, and that's where, for example, the technocrats come in, that's where the private sector comes in, that's where an informed citizenry comes in. And in the paper, we highlight the need to even reorient our education system to bring people to understand from a very early age what their rights and obligations are, that it's very unlikely that we can achieve the transformation that we're hoping to achieve.
The others are arguing that failure in agriculture across the continent is not for lack of trying. Basically, we have been trying, and that's evidence from the work that has been done. Basically, the tragedy is like governance failure and lack of effective political leadership. So we may need to engage with leadership if we are to actually transform agriculture.
On the sidelines, participants held 7 parallel seminars to discuss the changing perceptions, image and packaging of staple food crops, water management, agriculture policies and inputs, agro-industry and enterprise development, as well as new opportunities and current challenges in the sector.
Probably subsidies on locally manufactured processing machinery which supports agriculture, so that there's less importation of the same machinery if there's technique here.
What happens to the tractors, the combine harvesters, which are important for mechanization?
Probably we develop that sector then in support of agriculture, so that the local people can be able to have the technology to provide these machineries.
In 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, how long do you take to develop capacity for that? Manufacture tractors locally?
There needs to be a start.
If the tractors are working well, first of all, we need to import a few and test them on the farm and assess the guarantee of those tractors. As we continue using the tractors, we need to increase the local content of those tractors so that we make components of the tractor locally until we have 100% local content of the tractor and come up with our assembly lines for the tractor. But we must verify whether they are the right things to use on the farm or whether they're not.
We have experience as Kilimo Trust engaging the private sector, especially processors who would want to come up with commodities that actually use cassava flour. We have in the confectionery industry, but they did test these products in the market, and some of them were not acceptable to the market. The level of substitution that would actually make a lot of sense to the players in the value chain. So how would we deal with that? Because the government might decide that it has to be 40% substitution, but how would you deal with the market and acceptance of that product?
In Nigeria, they ban the import of barley, totally. So any malted product that you make has to come from soca. So if you look at Milo they drink in Nigeria, the Milo is made from soca. Initially, the manufacturers gave all these reasons, can't work, the qualities and so on. But once Nigeria puts its foot down, the manufacturers had to go and work with farmers and work with researchers and get the right product, the right qualities and so on. So there's an element of that, obviously. You can say if it's a big enough market and the manufacturers are making money, they can actually do the work that is needed, obviously. But that is putting a bit of much of a burden on them. Because even the first cassava flour mandate by Nigeria on 20%, I think first almost 20% cassava flour, they had a huge problem getting the right supply and the right quality. So actually they even changed it to 10%, then removed it, then brought it now back to 40%. So to me, I think there has to be a balance between both. Because if you just tell manufacturers to whether they want it or not, they will say no, because that's more work in terms of product development and so on. But if you put your foot down and also understand that there are issues, then you can work together. But manufacturers, the first thing is to say no, because you don't want to change your machinery, you don't want to develop new supply structures and so on.
On day 4, delegates converged together and mulled over recommendations arising from the Youth in Agriculture workshops and all the 3 clusters which they forwarded in a selected technical committee to draw up the final recommendations.
From the Youth in Agriculture, the aim was to enhance business and employment for youth in agriculture. What do we need to do to enhance business and employment for youth in agriculture? Lesson: large percentage of youth use social media, which has not been tapped to disseminate agricultural knowledge. So the recommendation, and you can expect this certainly from the youth, more engagement of the social and mass media avenues in the drive to create the coolness required for creating a pool for the youth into agriculture. Only the youth can get it. Lack of agricultural forum for youth to discuss issues of common interest in the region. Create a Kilimo East Africa Youth Forum to champion regional issues for youth in agriculture and also showcase more success stories on regular basis, so that the youth can learn from each other, they can build the confidence of yes we can by seeing other youth doing it. So this is the recommendation from the youth. Inadequate services to attract youth to the rural areas where agriculture is practiced. More rural directed development that will make the agro-based rural setting more attractive to the youth. And then I think this is the final one, minimal involvement of the youth in decision making. Increase the involvement of youth in the running of affairs targeting them, including but not limited to projects and leadership within the agricultural sector. Yes.
My recommendation to productive commercial farmers who produce surplus to feed this emerging market. I don't know whether we can put in strategic food reserves, because we understand there is a lot of post-harvest losses in our region. Maybe we can find some that will address that one.
I think we ought to remove the part that says who produce surplus, because once you say commercial farmers, then that means they produce for bulk. Because one of the challenges the agriculture sector is that when all of you produce at the same time, the prices fall. Reason being the demand is stagnant. So let's remove the aspect that says who produce surplus. Because if you've got storage facilities, cold rooms, silos, all that is storage facilities. So let's remove the part that says who produce surplus and say who produce in bulk. Then the aspect of emerging market, I think we aren't in an emerging market at the moment. The market is already there. So I think it shouldn't be an emerging market in 2013. The market is there. It's a case of supply, not feeding what demand can feed. So who feed the available market? Thank you.
The land tenure systems, the land laws, the land ownership issues cannot be resolved unless men are actually brought on board, because in most of the cases they own the land. And so for women and youth to have access and use of the land resources, among others, the men have to be brought on board.
Other key recommendations were made from the side seminars. It was an interactive session as delegates, through discussions, made the necessary changes and recommendations they deemed fit to propel the agriculture sector in the East African region.
I would like to recommend an inventory of water and soils to know exactly where we are right now, what is being done, what has been done, and where we are going, so that we can exactly be able to pinpoint what we need to do.
I think we should emphasize the lessons learned from Asia, Latin America, and elsewhere, where the investment in water, over 40% in Asia, over 22% in Latin America, about 4% in Africa, mainly in the north and the south. The middle here, very little. We must now increase our investment in water, whether they call it water harvesting or water harnessing. That is the main problem. From there on, you can say we can no longer rely on grain-fed agriculture.
I would like to see something relating to conservation, particularly within the upper catchment, whereby we can use the private sector to be able to fund under some scheme whereby we have some mechanism of supporting the farmers within the catchment, and then we can be able to utilize our water, so we take advantage of the private sector.
I want to join my voice to those who are saying that at least the lessons learned should be made a little bit sharper. And when we come to this other side, we have been proposing or recommending for a very long time about harnessing available resources. And there are very many, and with others are being discovered now. Can we be very specific on surface water harvesting? Because that's what we've not done. So that we may combine it with soil and water conservation, specifically towards surface runoff, harnessing of surface runoff for irrigation, not for any other purpose.
Instead of enhance, if you said remove existing barriers to regional trade and enhance investments which will promote more trade, I think you will have more concrete recommendations.